Inform 7 is a free, powerful system for creating text, parser, interactive fiction games. I'm Dennis Jers, and sometimes I get to teach interactive fiction in the English department at Seton Hill University. This video will briefly cover how to use Inform 7 to create an environment and a few props to interact with. After this, the next video will go into more depth in three main areas. That's creating an environment to explore, props to manipulate, and some basic characters to interact with. But for now, we're just going to look at the very basics and create one location and a handful of props. If you are new to this kind of command line interactive fiction and you'd like a gentle introduction, try the intro video. The link is in the description. Inform 7, which you can download from inform7.com. There are several different platforms. Just follow the instructions. It's pretty sensible. It follows the principles of literate programming, which means the code is designed to make sense to humans. Now, the terminology of Inform 7, the nuts and bolts, include references to paragraphs and grammar and story, and its central metaphor in the workspace is actually a book with two facing pages. So it sort of, it lives and breathes in a very literate space where people who like computers and people who like writing sometimes get very excited by this connection, the possibilities of this synergy. So Inform 7 is a programming language. It's not just kind of a markup tool that adds hyperlinks to static texts. Inform provides a default universe with built-in plain vanilla and kind of bland reactions, but they're hooks, they're affordances, so that authors can build on all the conventions and the affordances and actions that are part and parcel of the genre of text adventure games. So if we go ahead and start Inform 7, let's create a new default project. And, well, right out of the box, if I hit the play button, we have a working game. Okay, working. I'm being a little bit, generous there. We can do things. Interactive fiction allows you to do things like examine objects. I'm in this room, so I'm going to examine myself. I'm going to take inventory. That is, see what I'm carrying. I'm going to try, how about I try going north? And how about I exit? All right, well, as you can see, nothing all that worthwhile is happening. This is all very generalized, uninteresting, default, plain vanilla behavior. And it's up to us, the authors, to populate this very bland world with specific objects with text that engages the reader, to replacing this bland default behavior with more interesting behavior. So let's start doing that. I'm going to change example location. Let's at least personalize it to your office. And, okay. And okay, so those are lines of interactive fiction code as seen by Inform 7. So let's run this game. And now, well, I can take the lunch. I can drop the lunch. If I type look, previously the lunch was on the desk where I put it. Over here, the lunch is on your desk. Now that I've dropped it, the lunch and the desk are in the room, and only the stack of bills are on the desk. All right. Well, how about this? All right, Inform 7 is smart enough to know that in order to put something on something else, you have to be holding it. So Inform first triggered the take action to have you pick up the lunch before you put it down on the desk. Okay, and now I think it's totally appropriate that you might want to think that you could type. And, well, okay, yeah, you can certainly type that, now you and I know that some things are edible and some things are not, and then when you eat an edible thing, you destroy it. Now, as it happens, Inform 7 knows all this too. We just have to tell Inform 7 that okay, Inform 7 doesn't recognize the word lunch. It's not smart enough to intuit that something that is lunch is something that you can eat. But if we tell it it's edible, and we run this again, okay, well, how about this? I eat lunch. First, it triggers the take command, and then it eats it. And now when I examine desk, we no longer see the lunch on the desk. If I type I, which is short for take inventory, I can just type I. I know I'm not carrying the lunch. The concept of eating in Inform 7 is to destroy an object, not like make it go inside your body. Now, if I want to, we can try something interesting. We can try get on table. Okay, what do you think is going to happen when I write get on table? Okay, a human would be able to infer that when I typed table, what I really meant was desk. Inform 7, however, would need to be taught explicitly that table is an accurate, acceptable synonym for desk. So let's go ahead and do that. Try that. There we go. Okay. Okay, well, it says the table is not something that I can enter. All right, well, what if I were to say I'm going to rerun this command. Instead of hitting the play button and starting over again, I'm going to use this recycling button, and that's going to type in the same command I typed before. All right. Once I identified the desk as an enterable thing, that is something that the player can enter, now when I type get on table, it says I get onto the desk. All right. So here I am on my desk. Isn't that fun? Okay, so now I'm carefully walking through some steps that emphasize how sensibly and well put together Inform 7 is. And I think you can agree that this code here on the left all makes perfect sense. But the caution here is that just because something makes sense to you doesn't mean that Inform 7 makes sense of it. And here's an example. I can type your lunch is delicious. And, that makes perfect sense to you and me. But when we run this game, we get an error message. I click on this thing, and that takes me exactly to the line where Inform 7 is puzzled. And it says, the sentence appears to say two things are the same. I'm reading your lunch, and delicious is two different things. It would be like saying Laurel is hearty. Then this very literate and really well phrased error message tells me, okay, I already know about a thing called light, so if you say Blue Ridge Mountains is a lighted room, I'll be able to figure that out. So if you know a little bit more about Inform 7, the error messages like this, which, error messages in computer programs of any type are famously obscure and not all that helpful. And Inform 7 error messages are they're literate and they're well thought out. They're full of examples. Sometimes they're even helpful. Sometimes when they're not helpful, they're actually apologetic. And sometimes they're witty. Sometimes they're funny. It's enjoyable, I think, to interact with a program that's this well designed. But Inform 7 isn't smart enough to understand that deliciousness should somehow interact with eating. But we can figure it out. Let's teach Inform 7 about what it means to be delicious. Let's say And now when we run it, what do we got here? What did I do wrong here? Look at that typo. Here, it's interesting. Inform 7 is flagging this is the problem because it doesn't recognize this word delicious. That's because I actually had a typo here. I misspelled delicious there. And Inform 7, or really no computer programming environment, is smart enough to correct typos like that. So that was totally my fault. And even though Inform flagged me to this area, I had to look and see, well, where did I mention delicious for the first time? I typed an error there. Okay, get used to error messages. We'll spend a lot of time seeing them. Okay, so, well, it runs now. I fixed the error, but it's, entirely not useful. If I eat lunch, it says not bad, but if I were to change the lunch to repulsive and run it again, what do I got here? I'm sure I did another typo. Repulsive. Let's try that again. There we go. I run it again, and remember last time when I ate it, when it was delicious, it just said not bad? This is the plain vanilla text. I'm not taking advantage of the fact that I've taught Inform 6 a new concept of deliciousness and repulsiveness that's attached to every object. So let's now, and you're just going to have to sort of kind of magically trust me that this code works. The way Inform 7 works is Inform 7 understands the concept of eating, and I'm doing something different here. I'm replacing the default text. You eat your whatever it was that you ate, not bad. That's default text. I'm replacing it so that we're going to get a custom message whether a thing is repulsive or delicious. Okay, so that was repulsive lunch. That's a delicious lunch. And now I want to call your attention to this reference to the noun. When the game is running, Inform reads what the player has typed and tries to parse it up into commands and objects it recognizes. And here, the noun is really a variable that stores the name of whatever thing Inform has decided is the object. In this case, it's the thing you've just eaten. Now, I'd love to spend some time discussing and celebrating the mechanics of how Inform 7 deals with, definite and indefinite articles and proper named objects and plural named objects. It's, it's grammar. It's grammar almost all the way down in Inform 7. It's delightful. But this is an introductory video, and for now, I'm really just demonstrating the workflow. I want to demonstrate for you how Inform lets you go pretty deep down the rabbit hole, so to speak, when it comes to personalizing and customizing a simulated world. In the next video, we'll kind of go back to square one, and I'll walk you through in a more step-by-step process. But I want to show you the workflow right now. Now, if you are trying to tell a story where something like, deliciousness and repulsiveness really matters, the work can really pay off. But I want to emphasize that with this code that we put here, we're not just keeping track of whether this one item, your lunch, is delicious or repulsive. Let's, I'm just going to add another object. Let's run this. Okay, we got another object there. We can be a little bit more concise with the coding. That was 3 separate statements. Let me add a mango. And I'm going to combine it. The mango is on your desk, and I'm going to say it's edible and delicious. Inform 7 will allow me to combine statements like that. Now, let's add a tomato. And I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to try to tighten up the grammar even more. Wouldn't it make sense? If you're writing, concision is good in writing. Let's get even more concise. Let's call it a delicious edible tomato that's on your desk. You and I, who understand English, would think of this statement as more or less identical to the structure of these statements. And if you're, a good writer who values concision, this statement might be very useful. So we run that, and all that's fine. We don't get an error message, but when I eat the tomato, well, wait a minute. Up here, I'm calling the tomato edible. Isn't that the same thing as saying the mango is edible and delicious? The thing is, Inform 7 doesn't really care what's on this side of that is, which is kind of like an equal statement. Inform 7 makes no attempt to make any kind of sense about what's on the left side. It just trusts that you're going to name them whatever you want. So let's call this a nonsense. In this case, it's no longer a tomato. We have a mumble-bumble nonsense. I can here say edible, and let's go back here and let's note if I give an object several names, the player does not have to type out the whole thing. You can type a shortened version of the name. Okay, so basically for Inform, once you've named something, once you've gone to the trouble of naming something, Inform will then look on the other side of this is statement for properties that you want to assign. So let's try this. So let's just copy what we have for the mango, and let's put it down here. It's a little bothersome. I can do this. I think I can do this. Yeah. Inform 7 will recognize pronouns. So, let's make sure that works. All right. So this is efficient in that now if I want to make a whole bunch of edible things, I only have to change the name. Okay, so that's a little bit faster. We no longer have no longer have a mumble here. So instead of recycling the commands, I'll start over fresh again. Just so you know, you can take all. I can take everything. Try eating all. Nah, it won't let me eat all. All right, so I've called it a lot of delicious stuff. Now here's the problem, though. How believable is it to have a simulation in which the only way we can tell if a thing is delicious or repulsive is by eating it? I mean, this kind of strains the willing suspension of disbelief. If you want to tell a story in which the concepts of deliciousness and repulsiveness are just crucial to the plot, and they're worth the time that I've put into here coding deliciousness and repulsiveness and unremarkability, it's important to get it right. Now, I've seen this sort of thing in Inform 7, and when I was first putting together this presentation, it probably took another 15 or 20 minutes of poking around in the documentation and doing some trial and error before I worked the basics out. But now that we have a system that easily allows us to, here, let's say this poor tomato is change whether something is edible and repulsive and so forth. Here's some code that will change the description of a thing based on whether it is repulsive, in which case it will print this. If it's delicious, it'll print that. If it was neither, it'll just go on and end with a period. So let's try that. And okay, so the mushroom is repulsive. We know that. What's delicious? Okay. There we go. Okay, so we got a little bit of interaction with the world here. Now, we can, we can make this a little bit less chaotic here. Let me try this. Instead of having all these separate commands for all these separate vegetables, they all vegetables? I guess they are, depending how you define a tomato. I don't know, there's a mushroom. Okay, all these things, edible things. Let's try. Okay. I am now going to delete. Well, I'm going to comment this stuff out. I'm going to leave it here. I used open bracket and close brackets, and here the text in green. This is now a comment. I can type whatever I want. Inform 7 won't try to process that as code. So let's see if. Oh no, I need to end the comment there. I'm going to leave that stuff. Okay. Here's what I wanted. That's the part I want to leave as a comment out. So, I think these three statements that group things saying all of these things are edible and they're all on your desk. Of these things, here's the list that's repulsive. Here's the list that's delightful. And if I had to run that, that would be an error message. Okay, so let's see if I've successfully made it happen. What do I have here? Okay, I'm sure it's probably a typo. Delightful. Where did I get delightful from? Delicious. Delicious. And how would I type that properly? Delicious is the word that I want. So let's try that again. There we go. So that's working. And, okay, I will just start this over again from the beginning. So now we see I've put all these things on the desk. And because I've grouped all these things are on the desk, it would be really easy for me to, what if I, instead of lunch, what if I call this my lunch box? Instead of making it edible, let's call it a closed openable container. And let's say these things are in your lunchbox. If I had separately placed each of these items on the desk, it would be a lot harder just to change this one place that changes the location all at once. So let's see if that works. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So how about I open lunchbox? There, I find it. I don't know why I would do this, but I can put the bills in the lunchbox. Close lunchbox. Got it. A minute ago, I started typing close box, but I didn't because I realized that wouldn't work. Let's add a couple synonyms. What else? I don't know. Do people still talk about lunch pails? Who knows? Maybe somebody will. What do we have here? What? I have a problem. I bet I know. Here we go. Here, this is. I think that was probably the problem. I think I totally messed this thing up by forgetting to type that or there, or maybe there's something else. Let's see. But this is something must have gone wrong all the same. Should not happen. Reword something, whatever was just changed. Try again. Failed run. Anyway, All right. Very apologetic. Oh, and here we go. Isn't that this is these error messages are so deferential and solicitous. Yeah, and I think my problem there was that I left that word or out, and it just totally confused in Form 7. All right, so uh, now this last paragraph that I entered here with all the ifs and nouns and so forth, I get that it's a stretch to call that a paragraph. It is harder to read, but if you do know any coding at all, and you recognize this is kind of advanced stuff, at least intermediate stuff. But you could probably parse the if statement, and here's an otherwise if, and here's a third otherwise, or a third branch, and a close if. This really, if you know how to do if-then statements in another programming language, this will make sense. And now the documentation section of the Inform integrated development environment, these documentations over here, it's just amazingly complex. I don't have time to go through all these details here. Now I'm going to go ahead and let you watch a recording of me noodling with this code for a little bit to give you something to watch while I talk. But I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Inform 7 didn't just happen. It was created in the early 1990s by Oxford University mathematician Graham Nelson, who is also the editor of a poetry journal. And he's using Inform. Nelson has written some really epic and foundational interactive fiction works that kind of demonstrate just what interactive fiction as a genre can achieve. Now, Nelson released some early preliminary versions of Inform but led up to Inform 6 in 1996. Sometime in the late 1990s, when I was in grad school, my CD-ROM drive died, and that put a crimp in my gaming options. But while I was waiting for Christmas or birthday cash from relatives to get a new CD-ROM drive, I found myself sampling old retro tech adventure games from the 1980s. And I stumbled across an announcement on a Usenet news group about the release of something called Inform 6, and people were raving about it, and I got hooked, and I took my time. But using Inform 6, I entered a game in the interactive fiction competition of 2001. I also edited an Inform 6 programming textbook, and I was very active in the interactive fiction community. Now, in 2006, Nelson, working with several collaborators, one of them Emily Short, who is currently the creative director of Fail Better Games, the Nelson and others released a major overhaul called Inform 7, which is what I just demonstrated for you now. And that really strove to emulate natural language with terminology about grammar and story and paragraphs. And all this natural language sentence-like structure is kind of a veneer so that word-oriented people like myself can use, and under the hood, Inform 7 does, alchemical processes that I don't pretend to understand that convert these sentence-like, natural language-like structures into computer commands. Now, sometimes this month, the interactive fiction community is eagerly expecting a brand new release of Inform 7, which Nelson recently made an open source project. So all that is just a bit of background on what Inform 7 is, with a reminder that code doesn't just happen, and every coding language and every coding practice, it's chosen deliberately by people with values and obligations and goals. And Graham Nelson's goal, while holding down a day job as a mathematician, his goal, I presume, or one of them anyway, is to share this incredibly complex storytelling environment and to release it to the public for free, just to see what happens. So now my students who are not coders are often delighted by how easy it is to get started in Scratch, which is a very visual coding environment. But they also easily tend to get frustrated by the limitations of Scratch, which they bump up against pretty quickly. Inform 7 is it's a much more open space. It's got a lot more power, but, with great power comes great responsibility. It's easier to get overwhelmed and get frustrated and lost. And I cannot say that all my students love text adventure games, but in every class there are a few who really like computers and who really like writing, and they just take to Inform 7. as a really exciting way to explore connections between the kind of storytelling and the kind of rule-based programming that writing and computers can combine together. So, the Inform 7 manual is witty and it's stuffed full of hundreds of playable examples, but it's also really optimized to teach Inform 7 to people who already know how to program in other programming languages. So in my next video, I'm going to walk through a lot more slowly. We'll go through the steps to turn this same plain vanilla starting game into a simulation of a specific game, which in this case, it's the kind of a stub of a game that simulates being an intern at a newspaper, designed to teach some basic journalism principles in an entry-level journalism class. So in the next video, we will start again with the plain vanilla example game, and we'll cover creating a complex environment, more complex than this one, with more spaces to explore and more objects to manipulate, and we'll also touch on introducing a simple NPC, a non-player character, so that the space seems a little less lonely and you have something to interact with. All right, so I hope you were enjoying this whirlwind introduction to Inform 7. The next video in this series slows down a bit, and we'll see where we can take it from there.